Sarasota Manatee.
This is Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks for tuning in for live coverage of the 2024 presidential election. Over the next hour, as the results start to come in, you'll hear from WUSF reporters at election night watch parties across the Tampa Bay region. Political journalist William March is here, sharing insights with you, including the races that could have the biggest impact on the balance of power in federal and state government, and the proposed constitutional amendments on recreational marijuana, abortion access, and more. Most important, you are part of this conversation. All year, you've shared your hopes and fears with us about how this election could impact your life. So, how was your experience of voting? What issues were top of mind? And what do you think this election will change? And how do you plan to navigate what's next? Call and share your questions and comments. The number is 813-755-6552. That's 813-755-6552. That's ahead on Florida Matters. First, this news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. Polls are closing at this hour in half a dozen states. NPR's Susan Davis joins me now. She's NPR's political correspondent and co-host of the NPR Politics podcast. Polls have closed in most of the swing state of Georgia, polls closing a bit later in 3 counties there to give voters extra time after some polling places experienced equipment problems and others got bogus bomb threats. So how important is a win in Georgia for Trump and Harris?
I mean, a win here would be critical for both campaigns, but it's really seen as a must-win for Donald Trump. Georgia and its 16 electoral votes are part of a Southern strategy and a Sun Belt strategy where Donald Trump has been leading in the polls or stronger in the polls of states of Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. However, a Kamala Harris win here, which is also possible. Polling in the state was within the margin of error right up to Election Day. But a Democratic win here would suggest that the potential for a very strong Democratic night. Again, Democrats are really focused on the blue wall strategy, blue wall or bust, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. A win in Georgia would loosen the pressure to have an absolute win in all 3 of those states and would expand the map possibilities for her to get to the 270 electoral votes she needs.
And you and I have talked about this a little bit. The question a lot of people have tonight, when are we likely to know who has won in Georgia?
It has the potential to be quick, but it could also be slow. Georgia counts the ballots faster than many states. However, if it's close, it's also likely to be one of the most contested states because of what's at stake here. It is possible that results in Georgia, a call could come as early as later this evening or early Wednesday morning.
And we have a total of 60 electoral votes at stake here. Georgia 16, Indiana 11, Kentucky 8, South Carolina 9, Vermont 3, and Virginia 13. And we should mention at this hour that the Associated Press has made calls in a couple of races. Kamala Harris in Vermont, not a huge surprise there, and Donald Trump in the states of Kentucky and Indiana. So no big surprises there, but it's going to be shaping up, I think, for a long night. NPR Susan Davis, thanks for joining me. Meanwhile, Americans' mood on this election day, well, in one word, dour. A large number of people surveyed in recent polls say they think the country is on the wrong track. Some conservatives see a culture that they believe is too liberal and they view as threatening their way of life. Many on the left of the political spectrum believe the rights of marginalized people and democracy itself is under threat. At the same time, both sides are excited at the prospect of getting what they want. For some, it's the return of Trump. For others, it's to make history by electing the nation's first female president. In the next hour, a batch of poll closings, including most polls in the critical swing state of Pennsylvania. That is a key election prize. With its 19 electoral votes, polls in the District of Columbia and 16 other states also closing next hour. You're listening to NPR.
Support for NPR comes from Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners find skilled pros to get their home projects done well. From everyday repairs to major remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. This is NPR.
This is Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty, and you're tuned to live coverage of the 2024 presidential election. It's been a hard-fought campaign, and as results come in over the next hour, it's time to make your voice heard and hear from your neighbours across Tampa Bay as well. What has been the defining issue of this election for you? How do you think it might change your life? And what was your experience of voting? Call 813-755-6552. That's 813-755-6552. Love to get your comments and questions on the air as we wait for these results to come in. And coming up, we're going to recap some of the top races to keep an eye on, including U.S. Senate and congressional elections, state House and Senate races, local elections, and amendments on your ballot as well. William March is a political journalist in the Tampa Bay region, has been for many years. Thanks for being here, William. Just remind us what's at stake in some of these high-profile elections, including perhaps the highest-profile one, the congressional contest between Whitney Fox, a Democrat who is challenging Anna Paulina Luna. What's going on there?
Well, Matthew, the Democrats are likely to lose control of the Senate in this election very narrowly, and the House is up for grabs. Who will control the House is at this point uncertain. Because of demographics and straight-up gerrymandering, there are really only about 24 competitive House seats in the nation in which control of the House will be decided. And this is the only truly competitive House race in Florida. So this race by itself won't decide control of the House, but it could contribute to Democrats keeping control if they're able to win some tough races elsewhere.
Tell me more about the seat. I mean, what's the kind of makeup of the electorate in that particular district? How has that changed, and who might that favor?
Well, traditionally, for decades, moderate Republicans have been the controlling force in Pinellas County politics. And this seat was formerly held by a couple of them, the iconic Bill Young and then David Jolly. Then Democrat Charlie Crist beat Luna to hold the seat. But then in 2022, it was redrawn. The district was redrawn as part of a gerrymandering by the Republican legislature and Governor Ron DeSantis. And that turned it far more Republican, and that's how Luna won it. So the question really, I think, is going to be, she has become a MAGA firebrand, and the question is going to be, will that fit in with the moderate Republican politics that's traditionally been operative in Pinellas County?
Yeah, MAGA firebrand. I mean, what's your sense of kind of how popular that take is in this particular county? Is that something that's resonating with voters or is likely to resonate this year?
There are a number of prominent Republicans over there who don't like it. Pinellas County was the seat of the beginnings of the Republican Party in Florida in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it was populated by Northeastern Republicans, Rockefeller-style Republicans. The question is, how much has that Republican ethos transitioned into the MAGA Republicanism of today?
The number is 813-755-6552. You can weigh in. What has been the defining issue of this election for you as we wait for these election results to roll in this hour? And how was your experience of voting? That number again, 813-755-6552. You're with Florida Matters and live coverage of the 2024 presidential election. I'm with political journalist William March, and we're expecting to hear from some reporters from WSF around the Tampa Bay region a little bit later in this hour. What are polls telling you, William? What are we kind of seeing? I know there haven't been so many polls in some of these down ballot races, and maybe the reliability is a little bit at question, but what is the sense you're getting from those polls?
Well, as you said, there's not nearly as much reliable polling on this race as there is, say, in the presidential race. But what there is has shown Luna up by a couple of points. But again, it's been looking a lot like a margin of error race.
Yeah. Well, another race that we're paying close attention to is the race in which Andrew Warren is running for re-election as state attorney in Hillsborough County. He was removed from office by Governor Ron DeSantis, and he spoke to WSF's Steve Newborn earlier this evening.
People know when I was in office that we brought crime down significantly and we made the system more fair and effective and fought for victims. And in the last 2 years, people have seen what's happened as violent crime has skyrocketed. They want me back in office to get that back on track.
All right, you feel confident today?
Confident. I've been elected twice. You know, voters know what they got when they elected me in the first two elections, and so they're going to get more of the same. You know, smart policy that keeps us safe, that fights for victims, and that makes the system better and more effective.
Yeah.
And you heard there the voice of Andrew Warren. He's running to get his seat back. He was removed from office by Governor Ron DeSantis. Susie Lopez is the current state attorney who was put in place by Governor DeSantis. What about this race then, William? What are you kind of paying attention to? What are the odds for Andrew Warren to get that seat back?
Well, I've seen very little or no reliable polling in that race. The point Warren just made, he was elected to the seat twice. That could make him a front runner, but Susie Lopez has gotten substantial backing from the legal community and raised a lot of money. And now this is a real grudge match. When DeSantis removed him from office, that made Warren into a martyr for local Democrats, and he gets standing ovations from Democrats everywhere he goes. Meanwhile, DeSantis, when he was running for president, boasted on the campaign trail about removing progressive prosecutors, including Warren. And DeSantis has thrown his full weight into trying to defeat Warren. A committee recently started running and so far have spent at least $500,000 and will end up being significantly more than that, is my guess, on independent expenditures attacking Warren. And that committee was funded by two billionaire friends and political allies of Ron DeSantis, a Miami hedge fund manager named Ken Griffin, and Miriam Adelson, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate. So there you see DeSantis steering significant amounts, quite likely into seven figures, into attempting to defeat Warren.
That seems like a lot of money to be putting into that race. Well, let's go now to Steve Newborn, WSF's Steve Newborn. You heard from Steve a little bit earlier talking to Andrew Warren. Steve, how are you doing? Where exactly are you, and what are you seeing where you are?
I am at Casa Kamala. It is the Kamala Harris party headquarters in Hillsborough County in West Tampa. Things are just getting a little cranked up here. Not a lot of people, maybe about 100 people here in this big room. They're expecting a lot more. The folks I've talked to, they seem pretty energetic about the chances the Democrats have in this campaign. So, not a lot of long faces here just yet, but it is an early night, right?
It is early in the evening. I mean, are you hearing kind of more buzz about the presidential election and some of these down ballot races, some of the Senate and congressional races catching people's attention?
Well, here it's mostly the presidential campaign. I mean, they're glued to CNN right now watching the results come in, and we just heard a big whoop for Virginia going. No, that was Vermont going for Harris. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's a lot of buzz about the Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, medical marijuana, or recreational marijuana, I should say, and abortion. But right now, the people seem pretty glued to the TV about the presidential campaign.
Yeah. What races are you going to be paying attention to, Steve? We did hear a little bit of sound from your interview earlier with Andrew Warren, and that's kind of a closely watched race in that sort of state attorney's race there. But aside from that, what else are you really looking for later in the evening?
Well, the big buzz in the Tampa Bay area is the congressional contest between Anna Paulina Luna and Whitney Fox in Pinellas County. This is the congressional seat that used to be held by Charlie Crist. He resigned when he ran for governor a few years ago. Luna is a first-termer, and this has been a traditionally purple district, so it has been redrawn by the state lawmakers to make it a little more red-leaning. But the buzz there, this is one of the few contests that Democrats think they can win to regain a couple of seats in Congress.
All right, Steve Newborn there with WSF reporting in from Casa Kamala, the Democratic Election Night Watch Party. Steve, thanks so much. We'll probably check back in with you a bit later in the evening, but appreciate your update there.
My pleasure, Matthew.
And you can call in to 813-755-6552. Perhaps the Anna Paulina Luna race versus Whitney Fox. Maybe that's the race you're paying attention to. Maybe you're paying attention to the Senate race and challenger Debbie Mukasey Powell trying to unseat Senator and former Governor Rick Scott. Maybe you're just fixated on the presidential election. Either way, we would love to hear your comments and questions. The number, 813-755-6552. William, so we've talked a little bit about the congressional. We've talked about the county, the state attorney's race. There's also this U.S. Senate race, right? Incumbent Rick Scott facing Democratic challenger Debbie Mukasey-Powell. How is that race shaping up?
Well, the polling averages, and they're fairly good polls, have shown Scott up about 3 to 5 points, but state Democrats still have hope. They hope that they could outdo the polls, could outrun the polls, flip the seat, at least in part because Mukasey-Powell has made reproductive rights a major part of her campaign. That race could have national implications if Democrats were able to do that. And the reason is Democrats seem very likely at this point to lose control of the Senate. They will lose West Virginia, likely to lose Montana. Those two alone would give the Republicans a 51-49 majority in the Senate. It's also possible that Democrats will lose Sherrod Brown in Ohio. In order for them to keep control of the Senate, something unexpected would have to happen, something like a victory in Texas or like this potential victory here in Florida. But even the National Democratic Party doesn't appear to believe too strongly in that. They have not played in this race. They have not put large amounts of money, financial backing, or advertising into this race.
Well, Mukasey-Powell, as you pointed out, has kind of structured her campaign message around the issue of reproductive rights. She's tried to tie Senator Scott to Florida's restrictive 6-week abortion law, and that's Amendment 4 on the ballot. That would enshrine the right to an abortion in the state constitution. That has gotten Democratic voters fired up. It's had a lot of pushback from abortion opponents, including Governor Ron DeSantis. Here's Stetson College of Law professor Louis Varela explaining just what this amendment would do.
It's hard to predict, and I don't have sort of statistics on how often this has happened, but I do think it's telling, right? So it's important that people understand when these amendments are proposed or when the petitions are finished, the language is challenged before the Florida Supreme Court for vagueness or for on the grounds of it presenting multiple issues in one question. So you're not allowed to offer up an amendment that is confusing in its language, according to the Florida Supreme Court, or that asks more than one question at a time. The idea being, if something asks more than one question, I might want to say yes to one and no to the other, and I'm only allowed to vote either yes or no. This amendment was challenged on both those grounds. And the Florida Supreme Court, the same court that struck down 35 years of abortion rights in Florida, decided by a majority that this amendment was not vague, or too vague to be on the ballot, and that it did not present multiple issues. So there's been chances to challenge this amendment. The voters understand what they're reading. To the extent they're confused, they're being confused by interest groups who want to confuse them. And I think it's just really important that people understand that thanks to the Florida Supreme Court's ruling on April 1st, which eradicated all abortion rights in Florida under the current Constitution, we have an unusually clear choice for a constitutional amendment on the ballot, right? As a lawyer, sometimes I even find these amendments a little bit difficult to understand. This one actually isn't. It's no abortion rights versus Roe. And people can have strong feelings about both of those being a good idea. But I think it's really important that they focus on that question. Do you want the world that's existed in the U.S. from 1973 till now, or do you want the one before 1973?
Louis Varela, Professor of Law at Stetson University College of Law, breaking down Amendment 4 for us there. William, I mean, how important is this proposed constitutional amendment to Democratic candidates up and down the ballot?
Well, Democratic candidates are hoping very much that this amendment will stir up their voters, turn them out. One potential problem with that is there have been some analyses by news organizations of the other states. There have been a number of other states, of course, where reproductive rights issues have passed. And analyses have shown that there was a significant amount of what you might call split voting, where people would go to the polls and vote in favor of reproductive rights, but then also vote for Republican candidates who might be, in fact, even opposed to abortion rights. And in fact, in Florida, there was even a formation of a small group of people that never made a whole lot of noise or had a whole lot of impact. It was conservative Republican women in favor of Amendment 4, in favor of abortion rights. Nonetheless, the Democrats have tried to campaign as hard as possible on the thesis that who you vote for is going to matter to your reproductive rights as much as how you vote on Amendment 4.
Just briefly, William, what are polls telling us about the likelihood of this amendment passing?
The polling averages that I've seen, not definitive by any means, but they suggest it's going to fail narrowly.
Let's go now to Nancy Guan. WSF's Nancy Guan is at a Republican watch party in Pinellas County, I believe. Nancy, tell us about where you are and who you're talking to and who's there.
Yes, so I'm at the Pinellas GOP watch party at the Marriott Hotel in St. Petersburg, and it's a really lively crowd here. There's at least 100 people in the ballroom. A lot of them are wearing, red hats, Trump visors, so it's like a party atmosphere.
Okay, so what have you been hearing? I mean, have you been able to chat to some of the folks at the party, and what have they been telling you about the vibe and I guess what they're hoping for as this night unfolds?
Yes, actually, so I just spoke with a couple who are from Minnesota. They're snowbirds here, and they were actually holding signs opposing Walz, and they're hoping for a Trump win, obviously. Spoke with a couple of people. They're from the Young Republicans of Pinellas as well. So, there's an age range here, and all of them are, in support of Trump and some of the local Republican candidates as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a Florida election without some snowbirds weighing in, of course, on either side of the race there. What races are you particularly paying attention to, Nancy? What's kind of piquing your interest as this night goes on?
So I'm watching the race between Anna Paulina Luna, the Republican representative, and Whitney Fox. It's supposed to be a very close race, and Democrats are, hoping to flip the seat so that they can have that help them take control of the House. So it's a really closely watched race.
Well, Nancy Guan at the Republican Watch Party there in Pinellas County. Nancy, thank you so much for that update. We'll probably check in with you a bit later in the evening, but I appreciate your reporting there.
Thank you, Matt.
William, obviously a lot of focus on that Anna Paulina Luna and Whitney Fox race there, but I'm wondering if we can talk just briefly before we go to a break about what's happening at the state level. I mean, there are some races there, and obviously Democrats are hoping to kind of unlock the Republican stronghold that they have on, that supermajority. What are you going to be paying attention to? What should we be looking for here in the Tampa Bay region?
Well, the Democrats, of course, don't have any chance of taking a majority in either chamber, the state Senate or the state House. But at this point, the Republicans hold supermajorities in both of those houses. That gives the Republicans some procedural powers, and, of course, including the possibility of overriding a congressional veto. In the Senate, Democrats would have to flip 2 seats. It's currently 28 to 12. That's extremely unlikely. In the House, they would have to flip 5, and they have been said to be targeting 8, including 1 in Hillsborough County, where Karen Gonzalez Pittman, a Republican, is being challenged by Democrat Ashley Brundage. There's also a key seat in Pinellas County where Lindsey Cross, an incumbent Democrat, is being challenged by Republican Ed Montanari. Cross won her seat fairly comfortably a couple of years ago, but Montanari is a sitting city council member. He's going out at the end of this term and is thought by Republicans to have a good shot at unseating and flipping that seat to Republican.
So some good name recognition there. He's hoping to get a tailwind from, no doubt. Well,
Right.
You are listening to Florida Matters and live special coverage of the 2024 presidential election. Call in with your questions and comments about this election. How was your experience of voting, and what are your hopes for how this election could change things for the better? Call 813-755-6552. That's 813-755-6552. Our phone lines are open until 8 o'clock. More election coverage coming up after this.
This is WUSF 89.7.
As the news gets more complex and changes through the day, you need more than just a quick headline check. Here and Now keeps you connected to your world between Morning Edition and All Things Considered, as the news and the people shaping it are changing in real time. I'm Robin Young. Follow along on Here and Now, NPR News, weekday afternoons.
You can join us for Here and Now tomorrow afternoon starting at 1. Support for WUSF comes from David Reynolds Jewelry and Coin, offering custom jewelry design and repairs. No need to travel to New York with in-house master jewelers. David Reynolds is offering quality craftsmanship on the corner of Central Avenue and 40th Street in St. Pete. All that glitters bought and sold. And the Cave Museum in Gainesville invites guests to experience Rube Goldberg, the world of hilarious invention with iconic contraptions and humorous storytelling. More at cavemuseum.org, funded in part by Visit Gainesville, Alachua County.
This is Tom Hudson. You think like an individual, not an algorithm.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
You want civility, not cynicism.
Yes, I just wanted to make a couple of thoughts.
You like to be engaged, not enraged. Alan has been listening in to our conversation in Miami. Go ahead, Alan, you're on the radio.
Oh, yes.
Then join me every Friday for the Florida Roundup. It's the place to hear from your neighbors and newsmakers from across the state. The Florida Roundup, Fridays noon until 1.
And let's check the Spectrum Bay News 9 forecast with Chief Meteorologist Mike Clay. 30% chance of showers tonight, humid and breezy with a low of 73. For tomorrow, Wednesday, mostly cloudy and breezy, a 70% chance of rain on Wednesday with tomorrow's high of 86. This is WUSF 89.7, your home for NPR.
You're with Florida Matters and live special coverage of the 2024 presidential election. I'm Matthew Petty with political journalist William March. I want to hear from you. Call in with your questions and comments about this election and tell us about your experience of voting, whether you voted today or maybe you voted earlier or by mail. You can call 813-755-6552, 813-755-6552. Our phone lines are open. Love to hear what's on your mind as you were casting your ballot. What are the issues that are important to you? What are the amendments that got you motivated to vote in this election? Well, results will be published after polls close in the Panhandle at 8 p.m. In the meantime, let's just take a look at some county races here. In Hillsborough County, there's a renewal of community investment half-cent sales tax. That's getting people voting yes, 52% voting yes, just over 47% voting no, so narrowly ahead there for the yes on that one. Hillsborough County millage election for public school students, about 65% voting yes on that and 34% voting no. And then the state attorney's race that we've been talking about this hour, the 13th Judicial Circuit, 50%, just over 50% narrowly in favor of Susie Lopez. That's the Republican incumbent there. Andrew Warren, a Democrat, running to reclaim that seat, just over 49%. So a narrow advantage there to Susie Lopez. And in Sarasota County school tax referendum, 83% voting yes on that school tax referendum. So some of those local races there, just to look at what's going on there. William, as we were saying before the break, looking at that race where Andrew Warren is hoping to get that seat back, just kind of a look at that early vote there. Susie Lopez got kind of a narrow advantage. That kind of tallies with how you were expecting that to play out.
I didn't really have a good prediction as to which of those was in the lead, but I knew it was likely to be close. Lopez raised a substantial amount of money, got a lot of support from the legal community. She raised, I think, about $1.3 million in her campaign and in her independent political committee, while Warren, I think, raised about $800,000. So it was never going to be an easy win for him. The hope is on Democrats that having won this seat twice before, he would have an advantage over Lopez, but she has her own degree of respect in the legal community and significant party support.
Yeah, she was getting some name recognition during the storm too. I recall there was an incident where a dog was kind of left tied up on the side of the highway. There was a press conference afterwards where she kind of announced that the owner of the dog had been found and charged. And so, storms and disasters can sometimes give a little bit of a boost to people who are in office because it gets them the opportunity to get out in front of a camera.
Well, that's basically what that amounted to. It was a great opportunity to get out in front of a camera and then make a high-profile public announcement that she had charged the guy who tied the dog up there. Your standard animal cruelty charge is not something that normally gets the attention of the state attorney.
Well, let's talk about when the results will be known for the presidential election, William. Some of the other races too. Let's just listen first to part of my conversation with WUSF News Director Mary Shedden.
It's complicated, Matt, so I'm just going to lay out a couple of highlights. First of all, November 3rd was Election Day, a Tuesday, just like this year. Now, Pennsylvania did not declare its winner for 4 days. That's because they don't count anything, whether it's early votes, mail-in ballots, anything, until the polls close on Tuesday night. So that Pennsylvania announcement 4 days later, it triggered many states and media organizations like the Associated Press to declare unofficially that Joe Biden won the race. But states like Georgia and Arizona were so close that triggered automatic recounts, and that ended up taking several weeks for them to declare a winner there. And Biden won each state by about 11,000 votes. On January 6th, the traditional and mandatory meeting of Congress gathered to certify the votes from the Electoral College. While we all know about the violence that erupted that day when President Trump's supporters rampaged the Capitol, Congress still certified Joe Biden as the winner.
Okay, so it's a bit complicated. Why aren't we likely to know the winner right away this time?
Matt, like I said, it's complicated. Individual states have their own rules about when to count votes and how to count votes. So we won't know the answer on election night, and it could be days or weeks.
Mary, what are experts saying about when we might know who won the presidential election?
2 words: be patient. We don't know.
All right, WUSF News Director Mary Shedden weighing in there with some insights into just when we will know or not know, and the takeaway there, be patient. William, which states are you watching for insight into who will be the next president?
Well, everybody's heard about the 7 battleground states. First of all, 3 of them are also known as the Blue Wall states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Then, in addition to that, the other battleground states are Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. And of those, Pennsylvania, the biggest of the Blue Wall states, is the most likely to be decisive, to be the state that actually decides this election. It's the biggest of the 3 Blue Wall states. Kamala Harris's path to victory is mainly paved with wins in those 3 Blue Wall states. If she wins them, she doesn't have to win any of the other battleground states and could still achieve a narrow win. So those 3 are clearly the ones to watch first and foremost. But as you just heard Mary say, we're not likely to know the outcomes in all 3 tonight. Now, it will probably not take as long to get Pennsylvania's results as it did in 2020. It took 4 days then. Mm-hmm. Since then, they've improved their counting methods, and they'll be faster. But we're still not likely to know the Pennsylvania outcome tonight. So in lieu of not knowing that outcome tonight, I'm going to be watching Georgia and North Carolina, whose outcomes most likely will be known tonight. If Kamala Harris is able to win either of those 2 states, the other 2 battlegrounds, then it puts her kind of in the driver's seat. That means she could still lose one of her Blue Wall states and still win the presidency.
Right, so we're waiting on tenterhooks to see what happens there. Well, let's go to the phone lines now. We've got Sarah calling in from Tampa. Sarah, you're on the air. What's on your mind? What can you tell us about your experience of voting and what's on your mind when you voted?
I voted by mail, and it was the first time I've ever voted in my life. I'm 34 years old, so I know I'm kind of late on the jump. I'm really glad that I did vote, and I voted because I think that it's important to give women power over their bodies again. So I voted yes to 4, and I voted no to 3 because I just think that It's too easy. I'm tired of smelling marijuana everywhere I go. I'm actually in recovery, and it was important to me that, we get some control over the marijuana thing in this country. I think medically it's fine. I think there's a place for it. But I think recreationally, we don't need people to have easy access to it. We don't need more DUIs. And I voted for Kamala Harris because I can't imagine a criminal running this country.
Sarah, before we let you go, and first of all, congratulations on casting that ballot. I'm sure that felt great too. It's a big deal casting your first vote in any election, but did you go through the entire ballot? Because it's a pretty long one, right? Were there some races or contests you're thinking, I just don't know what to do here?
Yes, and I consulted friends that I trust that know a lot more about politics than I do. So that's what I did. I trusted people that know more than I do about. I voted for Sean Shaw because friends of mine told me that he was the right vote to make. I trust those that know better than I do and who have been around a little bit longer.
Thank you so much for your call, Sarah. Really appreciate that. If you want to be like Sarah and call in, we would love to put your call on the air and get your thoughts. 813-755-6552. Tell us about your experience of voting and what motivated you to get out to the polls today. William, a couple of pointers there. I mean, those amendments, quite important to that vote. As you mentioned, the Amendment 4, reproductive rights, and then, of course, Amendment 3 as well. We didn't talk about that earlier, but talk more about that. I mean, how important is that, do you think, as a motivating factor for voters, either on the positive side of that or people who say they don't want to legalize recreational marijuana in the state?
Well, it's a little bit hard to tell, frankly. I think that you could see this amendment drawing out young male voters, could draw out baby boomers. Democrats are hoping that it will draw out progressives, but the people who might want to use recreational marijuana are not, in my view, necessarily politically progressive. They might be, or they might not. Nonetheless, Ron DeSantis, one way or another, has committed heavily, very heavily, to trying to defeat both of these amendments. An investigative reporter based in Orlando named Jason Garcia sought public documents from the various state agencies that have been thrown into the fight to defeat these amendments, and calculated as of a few days ago that the government, the DeSantis administration, has spent $19 million and counting in public money to try to defeat these referendums.
Getting a question here from Facebook too. Greg I. Davison writes in to ask our political analysts, what are the indicators who is voting in Florida? Youth, Hispanics, traditional seniors. It may be a little bit tricky to pass at this stage, William, but what do we know about kind of voting trends?
Well, those kinds of demographic indicators as to who's come out on Election Day aren't normally available until exit polls are done or exit polls are analyzed after the election. So I wouldn't be able to give that listener an answer to this right away. One thing I would say is that there are all the indications that we're heading for a very, very unusually high turnout. Turnouts in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, for example, have approached or exceeded 80%. That's high even for a presidential year. So my guess is what you're seeing is a lot of people voting across the board.
Let's go to the phones again. We've got David calling in from St. Pete. David, you're on the air. How was your experience of voting?
Well, with the hurricanes, excuse me, my ballot got destroyed in the mail.
Oh,
it showed up, it was soggy wet, so I couldn't use it. So I ended up doing early voting. And then trying to find out where my precinct was kind of difficult, but it all worked out in the end. I was able to go to my early voting. But this is a really significant one for us, and I'm still shocked that we have an ex-con or a felon running for office, and there's no guardrails in place to prevent that. It boggles my mind that we even have to be in this position right now. So,
was that the one factor that really got you out to vote, or do you normally vote in presidential elections?
I vote every election, of course. It's our civic duty. If you don't vote, then you have no business complaining about anything the way it is. So I vote, I study the candidates, I learn about the issues, I want to, I'm an active part of my community and in my government.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, David, and I appreciate you taking the extra effort to kind of get out and vote, despite your ballot getting destroyed in the hurricane, because I'm sure that's a lot of issues that a lot of folks in the Tampa Bay region have been dealing with in the aftermath of these couple of hurricanes. William, I mean, that is a factor we haven't really talked about, but that is kind of an added wrinkle, I guess. We are in hurricane season. There have been other elections where people have had to kind of deal with some of those challenges and actually physically voting.
Well, there certainly have been questions raised in the last couple of weeks about how the destruction and problems from the storms would affect turnout. As I said a minute ago, it looks, though, from what we can see, as if we may be headed for very high turnout in Florida in spite of those. And of course, it is encouraging to hear the kind of story like we just heard from that listener, to the effect that he overcame difficulties caused by the storms in order to cast his ballot. One point I wanted to make earlier, Matthew, the young lady that called in prior to that, who said she had voted for the first time at age 34, that is exactly the kind of voter that Democrats are hoping for to be drawn out by the Reproductive Rights Amendment.
Indeed. Well, you're listening to Florida Matters and live special coverage of the 2024 presidential election. Your voice is an important part of the conversation. Love to hear what issues are the most important to you as you cast your ballot this year. And how is your experience of voting? What are your hopes for how things might change after November 5th? The number is 813-755-6552. That's 813-755-6552. Live coverage continues after this.
We are in the final stretch of this historic election season. Former President Trump and Vice President Harris are making their last big push before it all comes to a head tonight. I'm Scott Detrow. Join us for live special coverage of Election Night 2024 from NPR News. We will bring you the latest as the polls close and the vote totals roll in, with the context and analysis you need to stay informed.
Coverage throughout the evening with the latest local results and national results and analysis, all on your home for NPR WUSF 89.7. Well, economic challenges have caused the most at risk to fall deeper into poverty, and new households are struggling to put food on the table. This holiday season, you can help at All Faiths Food Bank, turning empty plates into thankful tummies. More information is at allfaithsfoodbank.org. Support comes from Tampa Bay Solar, Navy SEAL owned, with veteran installers. Over 2,000 installations throughout the state of Florida. You can take control of your energy costs and gain energy independence. And you can learn more at tampabaysolar.com.
What will the country look like after the election? 7 key states will likely determine the result, and the timing of that call will depend on how close the election is. Next time on 1A, we have analysis, debate, but most important of all, your reaction as our new political landscape becomes clear.
It's tomorrow morning starting at 10 from WUSF. Let's check the Spectrum Bay News 9 forecast. Chief Meteorologist Mike Clay says a 30% chance of showers tonight. It will be humid and breezy with a low of 75. For tomorrow, mostly cloudy and breezy, a 70% chance of rain, and a high of 86. This is WUSF 89.7, your home for NPR.
This is Florida Matters, and you're with live special coverage of the 2024 presidential election. I'm Matthew Petty here in the studio with William March, political journalist, and we're taking your calls until 8 p.m. How was your experience of voting, and what issues motivated you to get out and vote? You can call 813-755-6552. That's 813-755-6552. Let's go to Mike, who is calling in from St. Petersburg. Mike, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I should tell you I was a Republican until 2016 and switched to the Democratic Party with Trump. So my major reason for voting this time again was I just think he's unqualified and a danger. What I found interesting about the polls today was it took a long time. Luckily, there weren't long lines, but you ended up with a page full of people you had to vote for and then 3 pages of things they wanted you to decide yes or no on. Luckily, or thankfully for you guys, I got a good background on what it was, so I could just skim to the top of it and get through it. But I mean, there were people in there, taking a half an hour to go through the ballot.
Yeah, it is a long ballot. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Mike, and sharing your experience of voting and what got you out to vote. Appreciate that. And we've got John, I believe, on the line from Tampa. John, you're on the air. Tell us about your experience with voting. Sounds like we lost that call. Well, we do have actually reporter Stephanie Colombini, I believe, is with us. Stephanie, you're on, and I think you are at a watch party for Amendment 4. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm in St. Petersburg, and I'm with the Yes on 4 campaign's watch party tonight.
What are you seeing? What's the mood there like? What's going on?
Definitely very crowded, all with, people who have been advocates for abortion rights, including some patient storytellers who I've met who have had their own experiences with Florida's current abortion restrictions and want to change the policy. People have told me they're really excited about all the work they've done, but are, of course, very nervous. They know this is an especially close race and that, the amendment has to get 60% of the vote to pass. So even if a majority, more than 50, approve it, if it fails to make that 60, then it won't pass. So it's a nervous thing for people here at the party.
If it gets enough votes, what could happen next? I mean, how would this thing play out?
Well, it would effectively repeal the current 6-week abortion ban we have that restricts the procedure after 6 weeks of pregnancy with some exceptions for health and rape and incest, other cases. But we would also expect a lot of legal challenges and things that the state legislature might do to kind of shape how this amendment might go into effect. So they could continue to pass laws that would, restrict access to abortion in some way. And then this amendment would essentially be, what judges in court would, weigh things against if, people file lawsuits. So it's not the end of, the abortion battle in this state. I think we could definitely expect more legal action. There's another lawsuit also underway seeking to invalidate this amendment if it passes, alleging that it didn't get enough petition signatures to get on the ballot anyway. So, this is not going to be decided overnight, but it would at least effectively repeal that 6-week ban for now.
Yeah, okay, so it sounds like there's some nerves, a lot of excitement there too, but people just kind of waiting to see what happens as the evening unfolds.
Yeah, it's going to be very close from at least what we're seeing right now. So we're just keeping an eye on things, and I'll have updates as the proponents of this amendment react to the results.
WUSF Stephanie Colombini calling in from a Amendment 4 watch party. Stephanie, thank you so much for reporting. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
William, so that's kind of a sense of how things are shaping up there. Obviously, these amendments are really critical and kind of really a driving factor in getting people out to the polls, it seems like.
Well, that's what at least Democrats are certainly hoping that the Reproductive Rights Amendment will do that. And of course, a few minutes ago, we had one caller who said that that's what drove her to vote for the first time in her life at age 34.
Yeah. Comment here from Facebook. Sean Gravitt writes, I found it hard to find info on the appellate court judges. Also curious how 34-time felons are voting, or 3 to 4 times felons are voting in Florida. I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly, but yeah, I mean, there maybe is less information, William, about some of those kind of down ballot races. It may be a little bit hard to find out what you need to know about those judgeships.
Right. Well, there were 2 Supreme Court justices up for retention on the ballot, and the Democratic Party had sought to urge its members, its supporters, to vote against retaining those 2 Supreme Court justices. But there was no formal public campaign of any kind mounted, no advertising, no campaigning on that. And then you came to the 4 appellate court judges. And these judges and the case as to whether they should be retained or not is something that's really just completely unknown, I believe, to the vast majority of voters. I didn't even see any consistent partisan positions by all of those judges are Republican appointees, and I didn't even see any consistent positions by the Democratic Party on whether they should or shouldn't be retained. Mm-hmm. So yes, those were really low information races. even political insiders were asking each other, how should I vote on these things?
Yeah. Well, let's go to the phones again. Santos is calling in from Spring Hill. Santos, you're on the line.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to call, and I thought it was so interesting talking about people, why are they going out to vote? I mean, what's driving you to vote? Now, obviously, we live in a democracy. It's our civic duty to vote, so most people should vote. Now, I've been voting since Jimmy Carter was my first election.
Mm-hmm.
I have, over the years, voted in every election. Now, it wasn't always easy because back then you had to wait till Election Day. The lines were sometimes ridiculously long. I remember when I voted for Bill Clinton, the lines were ridiculous that day. You had to fight with your bosses sometimes because you said, hey, I'm leaving work because I'm going to go, my constitutional right to vote, and I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having several arguments with my bosses then. And so I could see in those days where people would say, it's hard to vote. And if I'm really not motivated, why would I do it? But now in Florida, you have to admit, Florida has made it so easy to vote. I mean, you have 2 weeks or more of early voting. You have mail-in ballots. There's just no real excuse. And we still don't get, anywhere near 100%.
Right.
I mean, other countries, other functioning democracies like Australia, they make voting compulsory.
Right.
I mean, why? My question is not what's getting people out to vote. My question is why aren't people voting? I mean,
what's stopping you? All right, Santos, thank you so much for offering your opinions there. Appreciate it. Did you vote early? It sounds like we might have lost Santos there. Let's go to Richard now in Tampa. Richard, you're on the air.
How you getting on?
Good. How are you? Tell us about your voting experience.
Good. Just want to throw some commentary out there. I always vote Democrat. In this election, I voted for Trump because it's get the landscape that is in a lot of people like myself. You can't openly say what your political view points are. Everyone's so democratic in the party. I feel like the people yelling the other people are fascists, maybe the fascists. So I think I'm a silent majority. People like me that are our wives, our spouses don't know why we vote because we can't voice our opinions anymore. So I just wanted to get it out there to you guys because there's a lot of people like me out there.
Richard, thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate that. William, some interesting viewpoints there. Somebody commenting on the ease of voting in Florida. Early voting obviously playing a factor there, mail-in voting. And then somebody saying that voters like himself, he said he voted for Trump. He's part of this. He called it the silent majority. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen far more coverage, and heard far more conversations this year about the stress of Election Day, just on normal people, but worried about the outcome. And I think that was an example of that right there. This gentleman said that he, if I understood him right, he said he didn't want his spouse to know how he voted because of the possible emotional turmoil that could result. That's one thing. And another thing is people seem to be far, far more worried than normal about how the outcome of this election affects the future of the country. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen an election with anywhere near this kind of stress and anxiety associated with it.
What about that notion of the labels like fascist being thrown around there? I mean, how does that kind of affect how people feel about voting, I guess?
Well, again, it's pretty extreme. It's more extreme than what I've seen. The kind of name calling and hatred that I'm seeing in this election is yes, there's some reference to Republicans and Donald Trump as fascists. Meanwhile, he is routinely calling Kamala Harris, saying she's mentally defective, that she's a communist, that she's a radical. This kind of thing, in the last two elections, the last two presidential elections, have taken this kind of hateful speech to a level that I personally have not seen in 40-some years of covering politics.
Just get an update on some of these county races here. I'm looking at the results coming in for Congressional District 13. This is the race between Anna Paulina Luna, that's the Republican incumbent there, Congresswoman, and Whitney Fox, the challenger. 84% reporting there. Anna Paulina Luna has 54% of the vote there. Whitney Fox with 45, just over 45% of the vote there. Tell me about that. I mean, does that kind of tally with how you were expecting this to play out, or still waiting on some votes to come in there, of course, but seems like there's a bit of an edge there for Anna Paulina Luna.
I definitely expected it to be closer. It's a little surprised that there's that big a gap. And I think what this is telling me is that the Republican Party in Pinellas County, which is, as I think I said earlier, for decades it's been a county dominated by moderate Republican politics, and I think what this is saying is that the political atmosphere there has gone more toward MAGA Republicanism.
I wanted to talk quickly about Amendment 1 too. This would make school board elections partisan, and let's just listen to a little bit of sound from Tampa Bay Times education reporter Jeff Solchik. He talked with WSF about the proposed amendment a couple months ago. Jeff, if this amendment passes, school board elections will become partisan in 2026. In the meantime, races are non-partisan. So what does that mean for voters?
Well, it means that they'll have party labels next to their names starting in 2026, but that doesn't really mean that they don't now. Because even though people are running and put NP and they're not allowed to say, hey, I'm a Democrat, hey, I'm a Republican, they all but do it anyway. And so right now what we're seeing is a lot of partisan electioneering without using the partisan words.
Everyone can vote in the primaries, so what is turnout like for school board races as it stands?
Well, generally speaking, the primaries are when they hold the school board races, and they're not generally as well attended as the general election, but what they have is the ability for everybody to vote from the beginning. So everybody who does show up can participate. If they go to party primaries, what happens is the Republicans have their election, the Democrats have their election, and then it moves to the general election, and that's where everybody else can chime in.
What about non-party affiliated
Just
candidates?
like with others now, non-party races candidates would go to the general election without having a primary.
Jeff, how would this amendment change school board elections if it passes?
I mean, basically, you would know who's a Republican and who's a Democrat very specifically and plainly. Aside from that, it might add some extra money into campaigns, because right now the parties kind of surreptitiously give money to people, but they're not supposed to infuse campaigns with their money. But a lot of other things won't change. I mean, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party still have, for instance, campaign forums for the candidates, and they only allow the ones who are registered in their party to show up. And things like that already happen. You still have candidates who come to your door and say, hi, I'm a nonpartisan candidate running for school board, and let me give you this packet from the people who are in my party, and you can see how they're running in other races, and maybe you can vote for all of them. So there's a lot of that already happening.
All right, so partisan school board elections, that's one of the other amendments there. We just have a moment or so here, William, but I wanted to just give you this update here. The Associated Press has called Congressional District 13 for Anna Paulina Luna. That's a pretty big blow for Democrats in terms of Whitney Fox, the Democrat running to unseat her there, and for Democrats generally in Florida, I would say.
It is. As I said earlier, that was generally considered to be the only truly competitive congressional seat in Florida, but it was never anything like a sure thing. It was always going to be a close race, a margin of error race. The surprising thing to me is how much Luna won it by.
Yeah. Well, you've been listening to a special live episode of Florida Matters. Political journalist William March, thank you so much for your insights. Do stay with us, and coverage of Election Night 2024 from NPR and WSF will continue with updates and analysis on the presidential race and more. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor, engineering support from Dave Anderson and Jackson Harp. Chris Sampson answered the phones. Production assistance from news director Mary Shedden. I'm Matthew. Thank you for watching and listening and calling. Stay with WSF as live coverage of Election Night continues.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7, your NPR station.
I'm Marco Werman. On the world, we get an outside perspective.
I was born in Yemen.
So many people in Sweden.
Most people in South Africa.
Because getting outside yourself can be a good thing.
Once you move to a different